This is the Total Perspective Vortex. I'm Tragula.
And I'm Christian.
It's July 1st, 2020. Happy Canada Day, Christian.
Happy Canada Day, Dragula.
So I have some good news for Canada Day. It's American news though. But as we speak, the Chaz is finally being broken up by police.
Good. Good.
Yeah,
So is it the city police that are taking it down?
yeah, it looked like it. I mean, they
Okay.
don't put out too much notice about this, but
Right.
there's people set up live streams of what's going on in the Chaz chop, and it's clear that there's some police force out there, mostly on with bicycle cops and riot gear, and they're going through in one big blobs, dismantling tents and asking people to leave, and if they don't leave, then they're arrested and escorted out of the area.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So with the bike police, so they're really going for the intimidation factor.
Well, I think it's because the bikes are a weapon, and also they're more maneuverable because they have barricades and things set up everywhere. So if you're
Sorry, do you mean
chasing,
like bicycles or motorcycles?
no, bicycles.
Bicycles, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen how riot police use bicycles, but they can use them as shields.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they hold them up in front of them, and it can be basically an impromptu barricade.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and let's talk a little bit about Chaz News, because I think that we can get to what I want to discuss today from that. So this is actually, I think, the incident that finally precipitated action, and this is a couple days old. But two black teens were driving, and they were shot and killed by Chaz members. So
Right.
like Chaz, a peaceful Chaz law enforcement alternative, right? So it's interesting how quickly uh, the Chaz alternative to the police force started shooting black kids,
Right.
right?
I mean, it's funny in a very dark way, but yes, it's like now if we do it like say like compared to the population that's in Chaz, they're far worse than America,
Yeah.
right? Like were these black kids unarmed? I'm
Well, this
assuming.
is this is the problem. Is there's a fog of war. It happened at 3 a.m. They're claiming it was a a drive by, and they were shooting people in the Chaz, and it was self defense. But the car wasn't. So things that we know, the car wasn't actually in the Chaz. It was driving towards the Chaz barricades. Um, there seems to be like there's like I said, there's streaming footage of videos going on in the Chaz, and apparently there is some sort of bang or loud noise that happens off screen before the 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 Chazistani police open fire. Yeah, I mean it's hard because I want to use like more. I was a little flippant there, but I want to use language that describes it, but these people intentionally avoid labels. So like, what do you call them? Like this uh, this insurrectionist communist self defense force, right? Like so they're
Right.
I guess they I think that's the best term for it, is the insurrectionists shot them. Um, and and so there is a claim that that there's no evidence or no proof that there were any guns in the car. Like they have video footage of people approaching the car and pulling the kids out, and there's no evidence that they had guns. And there's like firecrackers and people shooting in the Chaz all the time. So I think it's highly probable that they heard shots or fireworks at an inopportune time. They were already, on edge. Like, why is this car coming towards the barricade?
Right.
And then there was a loud noise, and they assumed that the car was firing at them, and so they fired back. Like it's you have to remember, it's inexperienced
I,
people with guns here. holding the
Right.
barricade, and they complain about, oh, the police force is not well trained enough to be using their firearms now, but at least they've had some training. At least they've gone to a police academy and they're getting paid and taking it seriously as a job. You have like this volunteer insurrectionist force. What do you expect
Right.
is going to happen? But
That's yeah. So, and I was just making the point earlier. So that means if you control for population, Chaz is the most anti-black police force in possibly the world because there's such a small population and they've managed to kill an unarmed black kid.
well,
So
multiple at this
by
point.
far, multiple,
Multiple.
right?
Yeah.
So at this stage, they're the most anti-black, deadly force, police force, possibly on the planet if you control for population.
Yeah. I don't think you need to make those play those games so much. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it has the impact that you wanted to do. Because I've heard the same talking point. I I think it's more of like, how are you better than the police? Is it, like, now you can, like, the demonstration here is policing is hard, and when
Right.
you're on the edge of violence, mistakes are going to be made. But well, we can see how this is what I wanted to show you now is the response that came out, because you can see the othering, you can see the extreme tribalism,
Oh, wow.
right? So I have multiple tweets I could pull up like this, but why don't you read that as our designated reader?
So read the Comrade Star comment, yeah?
Yeah,
Oh, gee, this angers me. Okay, so in the first armed conflict between the fascists and the people won. Two fascists attacked Chop with gunfire. They fucked around. Local communists organized self-defense and shot them both to pieces. The fascists found out.
yeah.
Oh my god.
So what happened to the black lives, the black teenage boys? Like, where's that part of the conversation? I thought we were
Can you
talking about violence, about up with black bodies, and sorry, what you were saying?
Well, could you imagine if the police were that tribal, that vocalized? They messed around with us. Sorry, I guess we already swore, so this YouTube's already flagged us. But
Well, I
just from reading the quote, but what's that?
I don't worry about language in this podcast. No,
Let's
seriously,
not
because
worry about it.
well, because this I am the purpose of the Total Perspective Vortex is to uh, talk about topics that are not being talked about enough,
Right.
right? And we are going to be targeted by the YouTube algorithm because of exactly what we're doing here. So it's like we can't, and we're too small to even bother trying to play their games.
Fair
Right?
enough.
So that the key point, the key takeaway is, if you like what we're doing here, like and subscribe may help. I'm not too enthusiastic, but what you can do is share it. Share it with your friends. Share it on social media, because direct links are the best promotion we can ask for.
Right. Okay, so back to my swearing. um, yeah, this is I forget what point I was making, but this is really intense.
It's really tribal. Is the key thing.
It's really tribal. It's
Yes.
really
And actually,
it's dripping with evil.
it's dripping with evil. Yeah, we'll get into another podcast where I define evil.
Evil.
But it's certainly dripping with othering, right? Of like, you want to talk about
Dehumanizing.
dehumanization of the people outside of your tribe. Like, they've heavily othered the quote unquote fascists, the two teenage black boys here, right?
Right.
And basically, and you can sort of see that how the communists define anyone, like, now anyone's a fascist. Like, whatever bubbles up about these two, the motivations of these two black teens, even if they were doing some sort of drive-by, I guarantee that their motivations had nothing to do with fascism,
Right.
right? Like I am 100% certain of that. And not just
You
because of the
don't.
color of skin. It's just sort of like you look at the SUV, you looked at what the contents of the car. It's like this was not some organized military attack on the Chaz. And it might have been you scoofing around. They might have thought if we go down to the Chaz, there's no even evidence really that they had guns, but they might have been going to the Chaz and thinking, oh, we can actually shoot off our guns if we're in the Chaz, right? Because there's gunshots going on all over the place there. Like it could have been something stupid like that. I mean, if I wanted to describe like an ill intent motive, it might have been something along the lines of like they want to loot or rob. But even then, I am seriously sketchy about this. Like
But are you saying they weren't trying to bring back the Third Reich?
yeah,
Okay.
pretty confident in that one.
Confident. Yeah, that wasn't their intent.
And yeah, and we talked before about how racism is racial tribalism, right? And
Right.
that is actually tribalism is what we have to be looking at and how we set up our tribes and how we stack our tribes, right? So and our tribes have to be more compassion based when they're close. Like the optimal tribe is the family, the familial tribe. That's where our tribal structure comes from. It's like you have a family, but you can be part of larger tribes, and I would suggest that you outside of your family, you have your friends, then you have your community, and then you have your country. And you can you can have other identity tribes that you're sort of part of, sports teams, but you can't take these things too far. Like you have to attend to your proper tribal stack. So for what I think that is emphasis here when I talk about how people on the left are more compassion driven, is they are also much more tribal. And this is an interesting contradiction, because one of the things to advocate for is like the John Lennon Imagine world, right?
Hmm.
Imagine there's no countries, no religion. I should probably listen to the song again to remember all their no's, which are very similar to the Cultural Revolution, what do they call it? But they have like the four olds, which is things they're trying to abolish. If you actually, there's actually a mirroring there of like the four olds to John Lennon's Imagine song.
Interesting.
Yeah. But where I'm going with that is that they want to abolish those barriers and sort of and spread out the compassion. So treat everyone like family. That will solve our problems. But it doesn't, because you can't navigate the world that way. You actually it doesn't scale because you don't have the same connection as you do. Like you have the connection with your family members that you don't have with other people. So because they're necessarily larger parts of your life, and you pay more attention to them. But as you spread out, you just can't care about people as much. They're not as affected to your life. You don't have as much direct influence on them.
Right.
So you can't attend to their needs with the same resolution as you do your family, right? So like I spend enough time with my wife, I can tell when I'm pissing her off and adjust my behavior accordingly.
That never happens, right?
Yeah. But when you're going to those larger scales, you can't. You don't have those direct, and it's an unreasonable expectation. Like I should be concerned about offending my wife because I live with her and I have to get things. But I'm not going to be concerned about offending someone in the Chaz,
Right.
right? Because they're not part of my tribal stack. They're not that well-oriented people that I'm concerned myself with. They're just not part of that, and creating that expectation will create resentment, and that's the impossible utopia that we've talked about before.
Why will it create resentment?
because it creates an expectation that no one could live to. You're setting a standard. You're setting a goal. You're setting a goal for potential worlds. We should all treat everyone like their family, and
Right.
abolish the concept of family. Like everyone's going to be a comrade, and everyone's going to be treated equally, and it's going to be wonderful because everyone's going to be treated with compassion. Right. So that's the goal, but that's impossible because I can't attend to everyone with compassion. And if I try to, my life will be absolute disorder and chaos. And out of that chaos and disorder, some sort of pathological order will arrive. Will probably rise out, and that's the fascism that arises out of communism.
Okay.
So here's actually a way that in society, so that you can sort of see how the scaling up is necessary and how it runs into problems. So in a small community or in my household, you could sort of say that I'm the cop. I'm sort of the lawgiver in my family role, and in my community, you might on a community level, you might have some people in the community who are the peacemakers, the judges who sort of keep order. But once you get past those, that like maybe 100 individuals, 150 individuals that you have some that you know, like your community expands out beyond that, you no longer know who are the police or the order makers of the community. So you need to start having people in uniforms, right? So uniforms are cues, so societal cues that we use, so to tell us something about people and their role in society without us having to know them.
Right.
And that's a necessary thing. So we need police officers to have uniforms so we know who the police officers are and we can respond accordingly. So we know who are the people who are designated by the state to use violence, but also who to go to when we need someone for help. Uh,
Right.
and, and other uniforms in society tell us about things too, right? So like people who, if someone's wearing a business suit, then that tells us that that's a person engaged in business, presumably, or who has been engaged in business during the day, and we can treat them accordingly,
Right. Right.
right? Factories usually have uniforms for the same reason, so you can identify who the factory workers are. Because again, it's like the factory is so large that you need to know. It helps you designate. Oh, this person does this. This has this sort of role within the organization, within the larger structure,
Right.
right? And school uniforms are another really good example. So school uniforms identify people, will identify that the people are a student, and that's one of the reasons I think that they're a good idea, because I think that we have to start treating students more seriously, like the role of student in society more seriously. That's one of the things that we're really failing at, and also sort of it ties sort of a loyalty to the school as well, and it's seen as this attack on individuality, but like that, and there's that discussion there, but I think that there's actually an important role of people learning to take on their societal responsibility and seeing it as that as not just school uniform, not as the tools of oppression, but actually an important role that one is playing within society, and that's what that uniform represents.
I suppose if schools were more tailored to make you teaching you how to take part in society,
Well,
it makes sense within that context, right? Right now, they don't really teach you very much. They don't teach you ethics, even I'm Christian, obviously. Any kind of religious studies, they don't teach you very much. They don't teach you how to help other members of society or get involved in certain areas. So but if schools took that role seriously, I could see that within that context, it's like, this is my uniform where I'm learning to be a productive member of society. It kind of changes the vibe a little bit. And I like the idea that you're saying, give them some, because it can give them a sense of responsibility, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm
And
filling this uniform.
it's not just a sense of belonging because we say, oh, we want to make sure that everyone feels that they belong, but it's also
Yeah.
that they have a role in society that they're playing,
Hmm.
right? And but on top of that, like you're talking about what like the sort of the social value stuff. I don't know, like about how much of a role the school has to teach that, but certainly civics is important and it's not taught,
Right.
and also uh, like there has like the humanities and classical history has to be restored. So we have to start. We talk about our journalists have all become activists and pundits, but
Right.
also our teachers have to stop being activists and pundits as well, right? Like
Right.
they have to um, they have to present like this have to be presenting what happens in a more neutral format. And we that's a deep conversation about what is neutral and what, but they're all everything has an activist ends now, and it's uh yeah. But to the side point of that, besides teaching civics, we have to be looking at teaching people to work with their hands and learning practical skills.
Absolutely.
And that's actually something I think that's really lacking in schools. And they do it partly because of cost and partly because you don't, it empowers kids in a way that scares teachers, like having kids work with their hands. Like,
What do you mean?
well, if you're gonna have a woodworking class, kids have to be able to use hammers, and they don't want to give kids hammers.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, right. Uh, but that's if people aren't exposed to things that could be dangerous, they'll never learn how to use those things responsibly.
Right. Right.
Right. Right.
And
So go
one
ahead.
of the things that I'm seeing, just kind of that ties into that, when you look at the Chaz Gardens, right, like that they built. So for those who don't know, they essentially they went on the grass. They put about an inch and a half of topsoil just plopped onto the grass, and then they started planting plants in there. And so it that's kind of sad for one. And if you don't know, you have to dig deeper. You have to you have to do all sorts of things. But the point I'm making is that it creates a sort of impotent type of animal. If you can't manipulate the physical world, and now they're not really prepped for the world of ideas too much either. It creates a fully impotent person, and that must have a deep psychological impact on these people.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the dangers of the way that we're educating now is that we treat people like they're always going to be taken care of, and that they can't fully actualize that way. We can't produce useful adults by if there's always this expectation that the world's going to take care of me,
Right.
right? Um, so there's actually just one more thing I wanted to touch on here because I was going with uniforms and how the left forms tribes. So you'll see that uh, the left does is highly tribal. So they might like abolish uniforms and that, but there's definitely within the Chaz there were tribes and classes of people.
There were classes.
Yeah, I would, but actually worse than classes, there were castes, and this is an evil that we don't talk about because it hasn't been part of Western society for quite some time. Quite some time, but most civilizations have some form of caste system,
Right.
right? So this is and a caste system is basically you are certain people are born with this with an original sin or original privilege that you can't escape. So it's an identity that you're born with, that you have this role in society that you are designated to, and that's that's an ugly form of oppression, and it's something that emerges within the Chaz, right? So they had like these black only areas and black spaces, right? And you'll see that there's other forms of tribalism that the left engages in that they're completely blind to. So
Such as?
academics are intensely tribal, right? So they will there's huge class differences. Like they'll treat like the staff in universities are often treated with contempt, but also you'll see just in the engagement of like they there's an expectation of like when they're when they become a professor or so forth, that they'll have like these strong expectations of internal tribalism. Like they'll be very selective about who they put into
Right.
their tribes, and then they'll treat the other outside people who are not part of their tribes very very severely.
Eric Weinstein,
Mm-hmm.
Weinstein was on Lex. What's his name? He was on a podcast and he described exactly that, and not only that, but that there was parallel kind of institutions that would form to keep or exclude certain members. So he accidentally went to a quote like a secret meeting that they were having to decide which students were going to get funding and who's going to get their PhD and so on. So just to drive in the point that this does happen in academia, and it seems to be pretty intense, and Eric Weinstein got to experience it firsthand.
Well, he observed it. He wasn't. He ended up being invited by someone who wasn't on the inside to a session that they shouldn't have. That he was specifically not supposed to be invited
Right.
to. Right. That was the key thing, and the
Right.
reason was that there was a selection bias going on of that they wanted certain students to become PhDs, professors, and he wasn't one of those students.
Right.
Right. So that's key. That's one example of it. But there is what I'm really trying to get at is the the left's hypocrisy, and it actually comes from. I think that, and I think that one of the reason the people on the left are so obsessed about like tearing down tribal borders and treating everyone like family is that they don't understand, because that they're so much compassionate thinkers, that they actually don't see the value in well-formed tribes, and they don't actually see themselves forming tribes. Like it's a
Right.
form of self-deception. It's a form of self-deception that's going on, and it becomes it becomes a dangerous delusion for the rest of society, because then the rest of the society is expected to entertain their delusion, and
Right.
that's a big part of our great of why our breakdown is occurring, and why we don't have any why we can't make any progress politically, is that we're forced to entertain the delusions of the left and their pursuit of an impossible utopia that they themselves can't achieve, even within their own personal lives.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Okay. That sounds like it's it.
Yeah, it is.
That's a good conclusion. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.